Hi, I'm Gita, and this is an issue in 5 questions. This week, over 150 million TikTok users anxiously await the fate of a beloved app. What's this all about? Let's get into it. So, first question, who is trying to ban TikTok in the first place? Well, it kind of seems like everybody in the US government is trying to ban it. So let's take a quick rundown through the timeline. This all started in November 2019 when Republican Senator Josh Hawley introduced legislation to try and ban TikTok to protect Americans from foreign influence and protect national security. That vote failed in Congress. Then in August 2020, President Trump, who was in his first term, took up the cause and he tried to ban TikTok by executive order, but a judge ruled that he had overstepped his authority. In 2021, Senator Hawley tried again, this time successfully passing a bill to ban TikTok on government devices such as cell phones and tablets, and that bill was signed into law by President Biden in 2022. The law was then subject to a whole bunch of legal challenges, which culminated in a January 10th, 2025 hearing before the Supreme Court, where TikTok argued that the ban was a violation of its freedom of speech. And the United States government argued that TikTok poses a security risk and has to be divested and sold to a US company or banned altogether. So that brings us to the present day. One late surprise that hasn't fully played out yet is President-elect Donald Trump filing a brief with the Supreme Court on December 27th, 2024, asking for the ban to be delayed until after he took office to give him time to negotiate some sort of solution. Remember that President Trump originally supported a ban of TikTok, so it's not entirely clear what's driving this late intervention, but there are a few cues from his public comments that might give us a little bit of a hint. First of all, back in March 2024, Trump gave an interview to CNBC where he kind of talked a lot about his large following that he'd amassed on TikTok with over 14 million followers. So that could be something that's sort of influencing him, seeing the power of the platform itself. He also gave an interview around the same time saying that while he still thought TikTok was a threat to national security, it would also have a direct negative impact on Facebook, which he called an enemy of the people at that time. Finally, one event that occurred shortly before Donald Trump began to voice some support for TikTok was a meeting with billionaire financier Jeff Yass. Jeff Yass is a very major Republican donor, and he also holds a significant stake in ByteDance, the parent company that owns TikTok. In fact, his personal stake in the company is worth about $21 billion. He is also the major shareholder of a holding company which merged with Truth Social, President Trump's sort of struggling social media company. Do either of those things have something to do with it? Who knows? The timing is suspicious, but we don't really know what's in President. So that's a little bit of the history, which brings us to question number 2. Why does the US government want to ban TikTok in the first place? National security is the primary driver behind the government's attempt to ban TikTok. The parent company of TikTok, which is called ByteDance, is a Chinese company, and foreign ownership of a company is not in and of itself a national security risk, but China's government has a pretty unique ability to compel China headquartered companies to comply with government requests, including access to user data. TikTok collects extensive data about Americans to feed its algorithm and recommend content. However, it is worth noting that the data collection practices of TikTok are really similar to other social media companies, which are headquartered right here in the United States. Also, there's no evidence that ByteDance is providing data to the Chinese government, and both the company and Chinese officials have stringently denied that it has occurred, but nevertheless, the possibility is there. Which brings us to question number 3. When would you lose access to your TikTok account? If the ban is upheld, then it'll take effect on January 19th, 2025, and the TikTok app will disappear from app stores overnight. So new users won't be able to join TikTok anymore and create an account. But what about the millions of existing users who already have it downloaded on their phone? It's not 100% clear. Most likely, you'll still be able to use TikTok on your phone if you have it downloaded now. However, when it disappears from the app stores, you'll lose access to software and security upgrades. So over time, the app will basically become unusable. It's possible that they could shut the US servers down and it'll disappear completely and you won't be able to use it at all. But at this point, we just don't know. Of course, several consortiums have sprung up trying to buy TikTok from its Chinese parent company. But so far, TikTok has said that they would rather shut down than sell to an American company. And even if they had a change of heart on this, the Chinese government has already signaled their opposition to a forced sale. In fact, in August 2020, China added algorithms, like the algorithm which drives TikTok, to the list of technological assets restricted from export to foreign countries. And in October 2020, it passed the export control law to govern the sale of restricted technologies to foreign buyers. So it seems likely that should it choose to do so, the Chinese government could block the sale of TikTok to a US entity, no matter what the founders of TikTok wanted to do. As it stands, January 20th, 2025, so just a few short days from now, marks the beginning of the end for TikTok. And that all brings us to question number 4. Let's say it is banned. What would the impact on national security even be? We certainly have to ask ourselves the question, is this effective foreign policy to safeguard national security, or is this really all just political theater? There are 5 reasons why a TikTok ban might not really have the intended consequence of protecting national security. So let's take a look at each one of those. Number 1, Meta, X, and other social media companies that are headquartered right here in the US routinely collect similar user data to what TikTok does. And that data is sold through data brokers on the open market, and this is completely legal. So in terms of accessing data that would help drive influence campaigns by a foreign entity, it's not really obvious that that data wouldn't still continue to be accessible to China and to others. Number 2, the amount and type of data that TikTok could provide to China just pales completely in comparison to the amount of data that they're able to get through illegal hacking activities. So it's not like the data hose is being cut off. Number 3, aside from social media companies, lots of other companies that you interact with routinely collect just absolute troves of data on American consumers. This includes your credit card company, your cell phone provider, dating apps, health tech services. And just like with the social media companies, that data that they collect, it's routinely used for their own business purposes, but it's also sold to others through data brokers. And that could include foreign entities and foreign actors. Number 4, because of weak data transparency laws for US companies, we really don't have enough information to tell if the risk from TikTok is actually any greater than the risk of foreign influence on any other social media app. So because we don't know how their algorithm works, because we don't know what data is collected and how it's used, because we don't know how their content is moderated, it's entirely possible that influence campaigns on Facebook and on Instagram and on other platforms are just as dangerous as influence campaigns that could be carried out on TikTok. And finally, number 5, cases of China, Russia, and other foreign entities effectively using Facebook and X, for example, for strategic influence campaigns are already well documented and far more widespread than the use of TikTok for that purpose. So it's not really clear how the TikTok ban is really going to do anything to address that. Question number 5, how should the US be protecting US citizens' data and the privacy of that data? Now, when you use Facebook, X, Google, dating apps, any free online service, you may not be paying in dollars, but you actually are paying. You're paying in data. The company itself is using your data to improve its own service. But as I mentioned before, that data has really become those companies' most valuable asset. They collate that data and it's being sold through these data brokers again and again to a huge variety of customers, both foreign and domestic. One of the problems is that there's no single overarching data privacy legislation in the United States. In fact, a legal doctrine called the third-party doctrine currently governs how companies can use consumer data. The third-party doctrine states that people have no expectation of privacy and information that they voluntarily share with third parties, with a few narrow exceptions. And this decision was upheld in 2018 by the Supreme Court in the ruling Carpenter versus the United States. So despite federal inaction, a patchwork of sector-specific laws and state laws have been passed. And as the states have tried to strengthen protections from consumer data, big tech firms have used their very considerable resources to slow the legislation, halt the progress of the legislation altogether, or water down the bill, weakening its core provisions. A good example of this is the Virginia 2021 Consumer Data Protection Act, which is very, very friendly to big tech. The first draft of the bill was actually written by an Amazon lobbyist, and implementation guidelines were developed by two tech industry organizations, which include members such as Amazon, Apple, AT&T, Google, Meta, Target, General Motors, and a lot of other companies that collect and sell data about US consumers. So their motivations are a little bit suspect. The Virginia law is rapidly becoming the model for consumer data protection laws in other states, which is a little bit worrying because it has big tech fingerprints all over it, essentially leaving the firms that collect a lot of consumer data in charge of determining how usage of that data is governed at all. Of course, in the United States, things can always change. Google, Meta, Amazon, OpenAI, and other companies who may want TikTok to be the sacrificial lamb on the altar of data privacy all made big contributions to the Trump campaign and to Republican campaigns in the 2024 election cycle. This, of course, pales in comparison to Twitter owner Elon Musk's $277 million in financial support for Republican candidates. And it's at this point unclear whether these large donations will sway public policy to the advantage of these U.S. tech giants and the disadvantage of foreign competitors, but only time will tell. For now, the government is only targeting one single company, namely TikTok, for a ban due to national security concerns. And, is that fair? I don't know. What do you think? In some ways, it does make sense. The US worries that the Chinese will mine the data of US TikTok users, similar to the way the US government uses Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, to digitally spy on foreign targets outside of the US without any kind of warrant being in place. And the Chinese would have the ability to do that through Chinese ownership of TikTok. To alleviate this concern, the CEO of TikTok did pledge that the app would remove US users' non-public data to servers that reside in the US and can only be accessed by US-based employees. That effort has been nicknamed Project Texas, and it included the creation of a brand new subsidiary, which houses most of the functions that are likely to give rise to national security concerns, such as access to US citizens' data and decisions on content moderation. The new subsidiary is meant to be governed by an independent board of directors that reports directly to the US Treasury's Center for Foreign Investment in the US, instead of reporting directly to TikTok or ByteDance. But as of May 2024, some key features of the effort haven't been implemented yet. Specifically, the independent board of directors isn't in place yet. TikTok says that they've submitted their list of nominees for the board of directors to the US government, but that the government hasn't approved them. So if the government doesn't take action, this whole key provision of TikTok's strategy to reduce the risk can't really be enacted. In addition, not all of TikTok's human resource functions have been migrated to the US yet. Some of those are still based in China. But even if TikTok did secure users' personal data in the United States as promised, it's really the algorithm which worries the cybersecurity experts at the National Security Agency, or the NSA. The very idea that the Chinese government effectively controls an algorithm that can promote or suppress content is a huge concern to the NSA. When you have millions upon millions of eyeballs consuming content, China's ability to dial up something that's divisive or dial down something that's unfavorable to China really gives the US government anxiety. So the issue of whether TikTok should be banned or not is definitely not straightforward. While there are some legitimate concerns due to the lack of overarching protections for US consumer data, it isn't really clear that the ban would actually result in greater national security. And that is because of the US government's failure to, on their own, protect the privacy and security of consumer data. So what do you think? Should our government be taking a more proactive and comprehensive approach to protecting consumer data? Share your thoughts in the comments.